There's a number of reasons to invest in strategic metals. First, we've been very successful as a project generator. We've got about 100 mineral projects in Yukon territory, cover a really wide variety of metal deposits and metal types. So we're pretty broadly diversified. We're not limited to one cycle, for example, gold or copper. We've got exposure to just about everything. But there's a lot more to the company than just the mineral projects. We've got 11 NSRs already established, and I think that through deal making we'll get a number more in the next few years. In fact, one of our goals is to establish a very healthy portfolio of NSRs. Beyond that, we've got deals that are active with companies right now, and some of those deals leave us with a large equity position. For example, later this afternoon you'll hear CAVU Minerals speaking. They've got one of our copper projects under option. We can, upon earn-in, we'll still have a 30% interest in that project. We get shares from them. They have to make some fairly large cash payments. So we're pretty well leveraged in some of those deals as well. Beyond our property interests, we've got a large portfolio of mineral projects, mineral shares in other companies. Explorers that are working literally in just about every jurisdiction of merit in North America. We've got projects that are in Nevada. We've got investments that companies have got holdings in Newfoundland and even as far away as the Dominican Republic. Lots of exposure in the Northwest Territories and none of it. So we're exposed well beyond Yukon territory. In fact, those holdings total about $40 million today. So that's quite a significant value to the company. We also have really good cash position. We've got about $5.5 million and no debt. So we're in a very healthy position going forward. And finally, we're about to close underwriting tomorrow. It's a flow-through underwriting. It'll be done at 60 cents. Currently we're trading at around 30 cents, so that's a pretty good markup. It's going to be one of the first charitable critical metals flow-throughs done in North America. In fact, I'm told it's probably the first. So we'll be looking at some of our own projects this year in quite a bit of detail. We expect to drill at least one, maybe two of them, and be doing advanced exploration, geophysics and whatnot on a couple others. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but we have a very stable board, well diversified with lawyers, accountants, geologists, people who've been involved in mineral development for a long time. Okay, share structure. That's often really important to investors. We've got, at the present time, just under 108 million shares outstanding. Goes up to 126 or thereabouts fully diluted. We have a number of warrants that are expiring in a month or so, and they're out of the money. So I think our fully diluted will drop, diluted position will drop fairly significantly following that. Again, we've talked about some of our investments. On this slide that shows $30 million worth of market. That's our market cap. Shows $39 million worth of shares of other companies. That fluctuates a little bit, but it's conservative at that level, I can tell you. And the 5.5 million in cash. And we've got pretty good representation from funds. We've got Ruffers involved, a group of out of Dallas called Condir has a large position, and Sprott has a position as well. Okay, so where are we working? We're working mostly in Yukon, a little bit in parts of BC. And the reason is that we sit in a really favorable geologic belt. For the precious metals, is sometimes called the Northern Cordilleran Mineral Province or Gold Province. A lot of majors have shown interest in that belt in the last few years. That's one of the things that really attracts us to it. When you see the majors making large investments, you know that not only is it perspective, but they're putting their money where their mouth is and buying companies out or making large investments. So we think it's a good place to be. But the same belt of rocks is also very favorable for other things. Porphyries, for example. The Intermontane Belt extends up through BC and into Alaska, runs right through the middle of Yukon, just as the Cordilleran Gold Province does. And so we're, again, sitting right in the middle of an area that's very prospective for porphyry-style mineralization. And we've been able to recognize a number of early stage porphyry projects that we think are really prospective. We've got a long history with porphyry exploration in Yukon. We were involved in the early work at Casino and other porphyries that have some merit. And we think we've recognized some great opportunities. We'll talk about a couple of them in a moment. Okay, so we were talking about porphyry just a second ago. This is the Mint project. It's one of our about approximately 10 porphyry targets that we've got staked at the present time. We own it 100%. It's located just southwest of the Alaska Highway. It's had a few drill holes put into it in 2011 by us. One of those holes graded top to bottom over 300 meters at 0.2 grams gold. Didn't have much copper in it, but it had really strong phyllic alteration, brecciation, had a lot of the characteristics that you'd expect to see in the outer fringe of a porphyry deposit. Last year, we did some exploration nearby, and about 800 meters to the north of that drill hole, we found a new area with Stockerwork-style copper-gold mineralization with moly as well. Very, very high-grade samples from some of it, ubiquitous veining. It looks like it's sitting right atop a buried system. And we like to think this one has a lot of potential for that style of mineralization because it's hosted in Miocene volcanic rocks, mafic volcanic rocks that are intruded by coeval dikes. And so we think the entire system is preserved there. It's one of the youngest porphyries in Canada. It's only 39 million years old. So very, very interesting target. We're going to definitely be doing more work this year, most likely a detailed 3D IP survey. Another one of our porphyry targets is the Alada. It's about 40 kilometers south of Casino in the same deeply weathered terrain. We think that most of the near surface mobile metals have been leached, but gold has lagged behind. And you can see from the gold geochem that there's a very well-developed anomaly about 4.5 kilometers long. It's about 1.5 kilometers wide. It sits right over top of a strong mag low. The rocks on both sides are mapped as the same unit. So we're interpreting that mag low as a major zone of sulfidation, magnetite destruction. So it's a very, very appealing target. Never been trenched, never been drilled. Again, this year we're going to go in, having finally completed the geochem coverage, we're going to be doing deep array IP on it again. So, in addition to the precious metal targets, we got a lot of critical metal projects in the portfolio, and some of those are on Canada's critical metals list for flow through, some of them aren't. We've got a number of tin targets which aren't on the list, but we think it's one of the metals that as the new economy evolves, I think it's going to become increasingly important. So we're very happy to have those projects. Vanadium, nickel, and cobalt are on the list, and I think we're onto a different style of mineralization there that isn't well known internationally, but we found some pretty significant mineralization already on our targets. In fact, vanadium ones, I think we've really got some that are drill ready and very, very exciting targets. They're already drill confirmed with one hole. Yeah, let's see if we can get this in to go again. Okay, properties under option. We mentioned earlier that CAVU was working on the hopper. I won't spend a lot of time on this because there is a presentation on it later this afternoon. But what I would draw your attention to is on the right-hand side of the slide, there's a comparative showing the geochem anomaly at Casino. So you got a couple billion ton deposit, and you can see the soil geochem at the same scale using the same ratio or same thresholds at our hopper property. So it suggests that there's an awful lot of potential there. We know that around the porphyry target there's really excellent skarn mineralization. And last year, CAVU drilled a couple holes, 3 or 4 into the skarn zone. The best hole was over 22 meters of 1.4% copper and 0.5 gram gold. That was just one skarn horizon. They stopped after going through it. We know that the stratigraphy in there is about 200 meters thick of favorable rocks, and they only drilled the top horizon. So that be very interesting to see if they drill deeper into that section, what they get below that area. They've got quite an aggressive program that's actually already underway. So we talked about some of our other projects that we've got interest in. So Rockhaven Resources, which is working on a very exciting, high-grade gold silver deposit near Carmax. We've got 31% of that company. Terra CO2 is a company that I founded that's working on alternatives to Portland cement. It could be massively disruptive in an industry that's much, much bigger than all the worldwide mineral industry combined. I don't know if people realize how big the cement industry is, but it's enormous. And Terra CO2 is working on a technology that not only can compete on a cost basis, but also has the ability to really dramatically reduce the CO2 emissions related to cement production. So we're very, very excited by the progress they're making there. We're down to 12.3% of that company, but we have warrants that would allow us to go back up over 16% again if we exercise them. They're very much in the money. That company in the last few months has completed some very large underwritings with international level companies. They've raised about $50 million US. Some of the key investors were Bill Gates, Lennox, a large home construction company in the US, and Rio Tinto. So we're sharing an investment with some pretty substantial partners. GGL Resources, hate in the middle of a Yukon conference to mention a company working in Nevada, but we're quite excited about what they're doing. We've got 38% of GGL. Honey Badger is an example of the type of property transactions we do. We have a 19.9% interest in the company, and we vended 3 of our silver projects in Yukon to them, and they're working. Worked last summer at Plata, and they'll be working there again. And I believe they've got a YMEP grant to also work on their Groundhog property. So we're expecting good things from them. Jumping around a little further on the circle, Silver Range, again, is mostly doing generative work in Nevada and Northwest Territories. There's none of it, but they do have some very significant holdings in Yukon. One I'll mention in a few moments, but they also have a zinc deposit at the mill and have very significant interests in an exciting silver lead zinc discovery up at the Michelle property, which is being explored by an optionee this year. So they're still an active Yukon company, even though a lot of their focus is out of the territory. Precipitate, we've got just under 16% there. They're most active now in Newfoundland and Dominican Republic. Just did a very good deal with VRIC and the Dominican on some of their ground. But their qualifying properties were done with us in Yukon territory. And then finally, Broden Mining. That's one that is near and dear to my heart. I hope we can get this concluded sometime soon. It's a private company. They're working on acquiring many of the assets in the Faro Belt, and we're going to show you a little bit on that in just a second. It's being done in partnership with the Ross River Dene Corp, one of the local First Nations. In fact, the only local First Nation in that area. And it's a very substantial former producer. The project, when it was in production before, was sort of 30 to 60% of Yukon GDP, one of the largest lead zinc deposits in Canada. And as I said, about half of the ore that was defined in the camp was actually extracted. The rest is still in the ground. In fact, combining the various resource models that are out there, there's about over 5 billion pounds of lead still remaining in the ground. 5 billion pounds of zinc. 3.5 billion pounds of lead, 112 million ounces of silver, and approaching 1 million ounces of gold. So it's a very, very substantial resource. I know the company is moving ahead very aggressively. They've announced the deal with Canada and Yukon. The final agreements haven't been concluded yet, but I know they're working really aggressively on a PEA, and we have 35% of that company. And again, just for people who don't know, Faro is in southern Yukon. There's some individual resources if you're interested. and that's the land package. So we mentioned that Silver Range had other ground in Yukon. That the large area in green is ground that we have under option from Silver Range, or Broden has under option from Silver Range. Silver Range is entitled to 10% of Broden when their transaction is completed. A few years ago, we defined the Keg deposit on the Silver Range ground, and there's lots of exploration potential there still. The other ground that's scheduled to be picked up is shown in red and purple. So the Grum deposit is on the area in red, which are termed their Van Gorda lands, and the area in purple hosts the Grizzly deposit. So if we're able to put this package together, we're going to end up with some very substantial deposits with great infrastructure already developed. In fact, there's a town of Faro is just a few kilometers away. Power lines, all the transportation that you'd ever need. So we're very optimistic. What we aren't picking up is the area shown in blue. And that's important because that's the area of the old Faro mine site, the former mill, all of the areas that are most problematic. And so that's going to remain with the Government of Canada, and they'll continue their reclamation work there and make sure that that site gets cleaned up. So just to recap very quickly here, and I'll leave a few moments if there are any questions. Rockhaven this year, we expect to have a drill program of substance there. We expect they'll be moving toward pre-feasibility at the conclusion of that drill program. The economics from the PEA are very robust, so we have every reason to believe that the pre-feasibility will be similarly attractive. CAVU is drilling at Hopper, so keep an eye on what they get there. Broden, well, keep our fingers crossed. We've got to get that deal signed, but if that happens, it's going to be a major catalyst for us because we've got 5 million shares of a company that's got about 25 million, less than 25 million shares, about 20 million shares outstanding. So we're got a lot of leverage on that if they're successful. Terra CO2, they're supposed to be in final design for their first plant. They're moving toward commercialization at a speed that us in mining just can't even comprehend. And finally, we're going to be drilling on our own properties this year, which we often don't do. We'll be doing some very significant geophysical surveys as well to better define the geochem anomalies we've got. So we expect to have some fresh news of our own to feed out to our shareholders. So, and again, tomorrow you should see the closing of an underwriting at 60 cents. We're trading at under 30 cents. So that's a pretty substantial markup. In addition to that, I'd like to point out, if you're looking for a deep value play, right now the value of our stock and our cash is around $45 million. Our market cap's around $30 million, and that discounts all of our royalty interests and our 100 property interests. So I'd say we're well leveraged, and I think that there's a lot of room for growth on our stock portfolio. Everybody knows we're in the midst of a pretty horrible market, so there should be pretty good upside on that as well. So I don't want to belabor it any longer, but I am open to questions if anybody has any. Well, thank you very much, Jean-Marc. I think investors are always looking for a 10-banger. And what we're offering, I think, is something with much lower risk. It's a more patient development strategy. I like to think that it's closer to a business than a lottery. And that, unfortunately, with a lot of exploration projects, is what you're investing in. Is you got one shot, and if it doesn't work out, then you've lost most of your investment. Whereas our strategy is a little bit different: patient growth, keep diversification in place so that you're never totally out of favor. And if we get into a really good market, the upside potential can be pretty significant. Last time we went into a really strong market, our share price topped out at over $4 with about the same number of shares that we have today. So there's no reason to think we can't repeat that performance. Yeah, I spoke to someone this morning. There's a chance that within 3 or 4 years, really depending on how some of these large, most important assets perform, we may have to split the company into 2 or maybe even 3 parts. We may have one part that continues as a project generator with our property base, a second part which becomes a royalty company. If we do 4 or 5 more large bundled royalty transactions, we could end up with 30 or 40 royalty interests, which is maybe not enough to, unless we get one that's in a producer enough to sustain the company, but certainly would be of interest to some of the large royalty companies. And then, of course, you have the property or the stock management company, which would be its own entity. So it's possible to break it into 3 parts. We'll just have to see how things work out on it. But that is definitely a possibility. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up. I've got 6 minutes left, and they'll probably love me because they never finish on time. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.